What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another UFC breakdown and predictions video. This time for UFC Abu Dhabi, Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Now, yes, we did not release a breakdown video, a recap video of the pay-per-view last weekend. That's because I was at my cousin's cottage all weekend from Friday until Monday, so I didn't even have access to my computer to make a recap. But we had another shit night in terms of predictions. I went 6-8. That is the worst that I've done since starting my YouTube channel, and that is the worst I've done in probably over a year and a half. So we really need to smarten up. We got to figure this out and get back to business. I did deep dive into my picks for this week a little bit more than I typically do with tape study and all that stuff. So hopefully we can bounce back. UFC Abu Dhabi is the perfect card to do so. So let's get back on track. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts down below. Let's kick things off. Starting off the card is Cedric Dumas going up against Denis Tiuliulin, and my pick will be Cedric Dumas. Not because I think he is a really good fighter, but he is going to be better than Denis Tiuliulin. Denis Tiuliulin has become a fighter that the UFC just feeds these new young up-and-comers to get a win under the UFC belt. Now, Cedric Dumas is 2-2 in the UFC, but he's coming off of a loss to Nursultan Ruziboev, so this fight is to get him back on track. The only thing Denis Tiuliulin really has going for him is power. He is 1-4 in the UFC, so for this sole reason of getting fed to these young up-and-comers is the only reason why he's still in the UFC. I don't think he's very good. If he gets taken down, he's like a fish out of water, and Cedric has shown that he has that wrestling ability, and I think he's going to lean towards that in this matchup to avoid that those heavy hands of Denis Tiuliulin. I think Cedric can even find success on the feet with his length. Like I said, I don't really think Cedric is that great of a fighter at this point of his career, but I think he's much better than Tiuliulin. So that is going to be my pick, Cedric Dumas, to get it done to start things off in UFC Abu Dhabi. Next up, we got Herbert going up against Rolando Bedoya. Now, Bedoya is going down to lightweight for this fight, and I actually didn't realize this until today, which is kind of interesting. He looked fantastic in his UFC debut on short notice against Chaos Williams, a rather dangerous fighter, and he was able to hang tough and get a split decision loss, of course, over Chaos Williams, but that is very impressive for a UFC debuter, especially on short notice. Now, his sophomore outing was against Kenan Song, and that was not his best display of abilities. Now, he's going up against somebody like Herbert, who is a technical striker, who has power to KO his opponents, but he is, I think he's like 35 or 36 at this point, and let's see, 36. He is 36 at this point, and the reason why I can't go with Herbert in this matchup is he is quite low volume. He's looking to counter, which Bedoya will give him plenty of opportunity to do so, because Bedoya has high volume in his fights. In both of his UFC fights, he has eclipsed 100 or more strikes, and I think the most that Herbert has landed in his 2-4-6 UFC fights is 49, and that was his last fight against Fares Ziam, and before that it was 43. So in terms of volume, I give it to Bedoya. I think he's going to give the judges more to score. He's going to be the one pushing the pace and giving Herbert that pressure and giving him the more volume in this matchup. Like I said, though, Herbert has the power, has the KO power, and he likes to counter his opponents, and Bedoya will give him plenty of opportunity to do so. We've seen Bedoya hittable in his matchups as well. It's going to be interesting to see how he does down at lightweight, so I do want to see how he looks at weigh-ins, because as you can see by this picture, it seems like he does carry around a little bit of excess weight. I don't know. Let's just see how he is at weigh-ins. I may switch up the pick, but for right now, I think Bedoya has the volume advantage. I think he's going to give the judges more to score, and as long as he avoids those power shots from Herbert and doesn't have like a wobbly moment or gets knocked down, I think he can get this done on the judges' scorecards. Next up, we got a strawweight bout. Victoria Dudakova going up against Sam Hughes. Now, this was a little bit trickier for me because I understand Dudakova is 8-0. She's undefeated for a reason, but Sam Hughes is a dog. Yes, she's 8-6, which is an ugly looking record, but she is never out of a fight. She's always moving forward. She's always looking for those takedowns to grind on her opponent. And even though she does get beat up in her fights, she doesn't quit and she doesn't stop moving forward. And I think that might pose a difficulty to a young fighter such as Dudakova, who is so green in her career. Dudakova is 25 years old, and she only has 8 professional fights under her belt. Sam Hughes has 14, and she's been in there with some tough opponents. In her last fight, Yasmin Yaragui, tough opponent. Jacqueline Amorim win. Piera Rodriguez lost. Elise Reed, she beat. Estela Nunes, she beat. She's been in there with Pinero, Luke Boonmi, and Tisha Pennington as well. So it's been a tough road for her in the UFC, but she's played spoiler before. Jacqueline Amorim, before their fight, was undefeated. She was 6-0 at the time, similar to Dudakova. Sam Hughes has played spoiler against an up-and-coming undefeated prospect before, and I think she might be able to do that again in this matchup. Victoria Dudakova doesn't really excel in any area of her game. Yes, she has decent hands, she has decent striking, and if she's the one on top, she can provide pressure in the wrestling department as well. But in that Jin Yu Fry fight, we saw a hole in her game, a wrinkle in her cap, I think is the term, or the saying, whatever. And Sam Hughes is going to be able to take her down. And if she was struggling to get back to her feet and gave up like 3+ minutes of control time in that second round to Jin Yu Fry, Sam Hughes is going to be able to do that. Because even though Victoria will find success in the striking and probably touch up Sam Hughes throughout this fight, Sam Hughes won't give up. She'll keep moving forward. She'll put that wrestling pressure. And I think Dudakova's like a -600 favorite over Jin Yu Fry, and that was way too close for comfort. She did not look like a -600 fighter in that matchup. I'm assuming Sam Hughes is the underdog in this fight. And like I said, she's played spoiler before, specifically in that Jacqueline Amorim fight. So I will take her in this fight very reluctantly, because obviously Dudakova's undefeated for a reason. But Sam Hughes will be my pick here. Let's move on. We got Guram Kutateladze going up against Jordan Vucenic, who is taking this on short notice and who is coming over from the Cage Warriors promotion out in the UK. Now, Guram was initially supposed to fight Abdul Karim Al-Salwadi, who got knocked out by Loic Radzhabov in his last fight. But regardless, I guess Al-Salwadi got injured. In comes Jordan Vucenic, and even though I do think Vucenic is going to find some success in the UFC, he's a dangerous fighter. He's got good hands, but typically he wants to wrestle his opponents, get them down to the ground, and eventually work in a submission. He likes to push the pace forward, back his opponents up against the cage, and once they're so worried about the strikes, he dives in for a double leg takedown and eventually drags them down to the mat. Now he's going up against Guram Kutateladze, who has trained and has previous fight experience in plenty of different martial arts. I believe he's had Muay Thai fights, jiu-jitsu matches, kickboxing, wrestling, you name it, this guy has done it. He is mainly a striker though, and I think in this fight he's going to be better on the feet. He's going to be good enough. He has good enough takedown defense to ward off those attempts from Vucenic. And like I said, I think Vucenic eventually does well in the UFC, but this is a little more, he's biting off more than he can chew here. Going up against Guram is an extremely tough fight, never mind on short notice, in Abu Dhabi, nevertheless, as a UFC debut. And people are going to say, yeah, Guram, he's been off for a year. I get it, but it's better. Yeah, I think he's still only 32 years old, and after losing to Elves Brener, the guy was kicking the shit out of Elves Brener for every minute of that fight, and then he ended up crumbling at the end. I don't know if it was a body shot, I believe it was, but I'm not going to hold that against him. Brener is dangerous, and Brener is known to take an absolute shit kicking and then come back to finish off his opponents. I think Guram is the much better fighter in this matchup. I think it's a little too early for Vucenic, who I think will do well in the UFC. I've said it 3 times already, but right now I think Garam will get this done. I don't know if he'll knock out Vucenic. We will see. I think Vucenic fought on July 20th as well, so I don't know how prepared he's going to be to take on somebody like Garam on such short notice across the country, or across the world, as a UFC debut. So I will take Garam Kutateladze to get this done. Next up, we got a sloppy heavyweight fight. Shamil Gaziev going up against Dontel Mays. There is no technical analysis that is going to help you make a decision here. I think Shamil Gaziev is just the better fighter. I've never really been impressed with Dontel Mays. He continues to get opportunities to show himself, and he just completely fails most of them. And he really only has power to back him up. Shamil Gaziev he has power as well. He has the volume on the feet, and he will wrestle. And he'll do it successfully, especially up against somebody like Dontel Mays. Now, Gaziev's last fight against Rosenstruik definitely was not an appealing fight to watch, especially on the Gaziev side. But I think it was his second fight. It was his first main event, second fight in the UFC. Rosenstruik is a tough, savvy veteran to go up against. So I'm not going to hold that against him. But I do think he has the goods to beat somebody like Dontel Mays. I think Shamil Gaziev actually has fighting skills, and this should be a good win for him, nice and easy. But it is a sloppy heavyweight, low-level heavyweight fight, so who knows what's going to happen. I'm just going to go with Shamil. I think he actually has skills as a fighter. And let's move on. Next up, we got Muhammad Yahya going up against Kawe Fernandes, I believe is how you pronounce it. I have no idea, and I don't even know why they don't have an actual model of him. He's already fought in the UFC before. But nevertheless, we got Muhammad Yahya, who this is his sophomore outing. I believe he fought Trevor Peek in his UFC debut last year. Yeah, October 2023. And he ended up losing a unanimous decision because Trevor Peek put the pace on him. He put his back up against the cage. And typically in Yahya's fights, if he gets pushed back against the cage, he is hittable and he can get taken down. Yahya loves that left body kick, and he has power to KO his opponents. Now, if you look at Kawe Fernandes, he is going to be much faster on in the striking. He has explosiveness as well, and he likes to use those body kicks and low kicks. He's very kick friendly in his approach, and even though in his last fight, I think he lost in his UFC debut, he lost to Mark Chiesa, but it was by split decision. Chiesa was able to wrestle him, hold him down at the ground for a good amount of the fight, but when it was on the feet, it was very evident that Fernandes was way better on the feet, and in this matchup, I think that'll be the case as well. I don't see Yahya wrestling in this matchup, which is probably going to be his best path to victory because Fernandes has lost in that manner before. But I think Fernandes, like I said, very kick-friendly. He's going to use that body kick well, those low kicks well. He's going to push Yahya up against the cage where Yahya struggles in the striking defense. And I think Fernandes is going to be able to piece up Muhammad Yahya in this matchup. I will take Fernandes to get this done. Let's move on to the next fight. We got a light heavyweight showdown going up against, or it's Azamat Murzakanov going up against Alonzo Menifield. And I am going to pick Murzakanov. Murzakanov has been off for over a year. He was mending a broken arm, I believe, in that Dustin Jacoby fight. And I just think he's going to be the better fighter here. He actually has technical abilities anywhere the fight goes. He is mainly a striker, regardless of him being a Russian. And Russians, as we know, typically have that Sambo background to wrestle their opponents. But even though Azamat has that in his back pocket, he doesn't really use it in the UFC especially. He likes to use his striking technique on the feet to piece up his opponents, land those powerful strikes, and put them away. Murzakanov has real power, but so does Alonzo Menifield. Alonzo Menifield is an absolute tank, and everything he does is muscle based. When he shoots for those takedowns, very strong. When he throws, it's very heavy. But the problem with Menifield is a lot of his strikes are looping and they're very telegraphed. He doesn't really stick out shots down the middle, and it's hard for him to land that big shot against strikers such as Murzakanov. In that Dustin Jacoby fight, Menifield was losing lost those first 2 rounds. He was getting pieced up. Jacoby was doing anything he wanted on the feet. And I don't want to say he was losing the first 2 rounds because I think he won a decision there. So he must have won the first or second round as well. But he looked like he was on his way to a loss. And then he knocked down Jacoby late in that third, because he has that power throughout the entire fight. Both of these guys will fade throughout the 15 minutes, but both of them have late finishes and late knockdowns in their UFC career, and they have power through the first and 15th minute of each fight. I just think that Azamat is the more technical striker who also holds power, whereas Menifield is more of just a power-based guy. He doesn't really have the technique on the feet. And the fact that he's already coming back after getting knocked out by Olberg in like 12 seconds, that was back in May. So this is a week less than 3 months, and he's already back. So even though we can say, oh, Murzakanov is coming off of a year and 4 month layoff, and he's had 2 canceled fights that were both him canceling, we can say the same for Menifield, the worrisome part of it, because he got knocked out less than 3 months ago by Olberg. So we'll see how this ends up going. I'm not confident in either side, but I will take Murzakanov to have the more impactful moments in this fight and just be the overall better striker. Menifield may find some success with the takedowns, but I see this predominantly being on the feet. Regardless, I will take Azamat to get this done. Let's move on. I think this is the first fight of the main card. It is, so make sure you hit that like button, drop a subscription if you are new to the channel, and comment down below with your thoughts on this entire UFC Abu Dhabi card and whatever matchup. Whether you agree or disagree, I want to hear what you guys think. Next up, starting off the main card, we got Joel Alvarez taking on Elvis Brener. Now, Elvis Brener is everybody's favorite underdog because he is literally the definition of a dog. Regardless of how many minutes, how many seconds he's getting his ass kicked in his fights, he doesn't quit. He keeps moving forward, and he will be in the fight for the entirety of it. And he is going to be dangerous in the entire fight as well. The only problem is Joel Alvarez is equally as dangerous. But the problem is, the whole thing I just explained about Elvis Brener being an absolute dog, that is what worries me in this matchup. His durability and toughness is his A game. That is his bread and butter, and that's why he finds success. I'm talking about Elvis Brener. Because, like I said, doesn't matter how much he gets beat up in his fights, he will stick around and be just as dangerous in the 15th minute as he is in the first minute. Joel Alvarez, though, he is a bona fide finisher. He has 20 wins in his career and 20 finishes. He's only been to the scorecards once, which he lost, but I think he has 3 KOs and 17 career submissions, which is absolutely insane. Brener gets damaged in his fights. That has been the story of his UFC career. Regardless of who he's fighting, he gets hurt. In the Guram Kutateladze fight. Okay, so let's go back. His UFC debut, Tukagov, split decision. Arguably, he lost that fight. Wasn't a very good showing. Next up, Guram Kutateladze. Like I said, he was getting beat up for the 12 minutes of that fight, but then he landed some big shots on Guram and ended up putting him away. So that's a fantastic come-from-behind win, but not without adversity. It goes and knocks out Kenan Kruszuski in the first round, where at the time we thought it was an impressive win, but as we see, Kruszuski really isn't that good of a fighter, as we saw in the Kurt Holoba fight. His last fight against Oralbai, same thing. Yes, he's there for every minute of the fight, but he got hurt in that fight as well against Oralbai. Joel Alvarez, if he hurts Brener, which history shows Brener will get tagged with something big, Joel Alvarez is a finisher. He will smell the blood. He will finish Brener if he hurts him at any point, and I believe he does. He has a 6'3" frame, which is insane for lightweight. He has the length advantage as well, and I think this is going to be I think he's going to be able to finish Brener, honestly. I do. Even though Brener is really tough. He's never been submitted or KO'd. Joel Alvarez, like I said, he's a shark, man. He smells that blood, and he's going to finish his opponent if he thinks they're hurt. And Brener has shown that he likes to get hurt in his UFC fights. So I was going to pick Brener. Like I said, it's the people's favorite underdog. But I think Joel Alvarez will get this done. Let's move on. Up the card, we got Mackenzie Dern taking on Lupita Godinez. And I will be taking Godinez in this fight. She arguably had this exact same matchup in her last outing against Verna Jandiroba, who is a more dangerous version of Mackenzie Dern. Yes, I know MMA math doesn't work out, and Mackenzie Dern actually has a win over Jandiroba, but at the current point of each of their careers, which is Dern and Jandiroba, Jandiroba is the much more dangerous fighter, has better wrestling, better control on the ground. Dern, even though she has this elite grappling that everybody talks about all the time, she hasn't submitted anybody since April 2021. She armbarred Nina Nunes, okay? So that just goes to show you that, like, yeah, she has good jiu-jitsu, she has good grappling, but is it working against these higher level opponents in the UFC? No, it isn't. All right, she loses to Marina Rodriguez, wins a split decision against Tisha Pennington, which is solid. But the Yan Xiaonan fight, me and my cousin actually had Yan Xiaonan because of the same reason. She has terrible striking, and her grappling just isn't as good as everybody makes it out to be when she takes that step up in competition. Angela Hill, unanimous decision win against Angela. That is actually kind of impressive considering that Angela Hill's kind of having this career resurgence. So good for that was a solid win for her. Jessica Andrade, a lot of people thought Dern was going to beat her there. I don't know why. Jessica Andrade, way better on the feet, way stronger, way more dangerous on the feet, ended up KOing her in the second. Amanda Lemos, same thing. A lot of people thought that Dern was going to do to Lemos what Jandiroba just did to Lemos, but no, she's got her ass kicked. That fight could have ended in a KO TKO as well. Now, I don't think Godinez is as dangerous as a Lemos and Andrade, but I think it's going to be a similar outcome. Godinez, even though she is kind of hit or miss sometimes, she's going to have way better striking in this matchup. And if the fight gets to the ground, I think it's going to be on Godinez's decision, because she has shown that she can ragdoll her opponents, wrestle them, and get them down to the ground. But I think she's going to avoid that against Dern, because Dern really poses no threat on the feet. And why would you go into and give her a chance? The only way she can win is by submitting you. I think Godinez pieces up Dern on the feet. I don't think it's even close on the feet. And if the fight does get to the ground, I think it's Godinez initiating the wrestling. The reason why, because even though the Jandiroba fight, like I mentioned, this is arguably an easier version of that fight. And Godinez did lose to Jandiroba, but Jandiroba has good enough wrestling to get the takedowns, to get her opponents where she wants them, which is on the mat in grappling exchanges. Dern does not have good takedowns, and that's been her problem. If she worked on the takedowns, she can actually find more success using her grappling and her jiu-jitsu. But like I said, I think she's kind of overrated in that department. She hasn't subbed anybody since 2021, and it was Nina Nunes. So I will take Lupita Godinez to get this done, but it is a women's MMA fight, so who knows? I'll take Godinez, though. Next up, we got Tony Ferguson going up against Michael Chiesa. And I'm going to do something stupid here, and you guys probably already know what it's going to be. And I'm picking Tony Ferguson to get this done. Yes, I know I sound very delusional, but I have my reasoning. Tony Ferguson, 40 years old. Yes. 7-fight losing streak. Yes. And I've picked against him in every single fight, basically. Every single fight during this losing streak. I picked him. I picked Michael Chandler. I picked Diaz. I picked Bobby. I picked Patty. All to get it done. But for this fight, I think it is winnable for Tony Ferguson. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, dude, you're crazy. And I might just be, but let's just break it down, okay? Let's just break it down. Tony Ferguson of old is not Tony Ferguson right now. I completely understand that. But 40 years old to Michael Chiesa, who is 36 years old. So, yes, it's not like Michael Chiesa is like this young spring chicken. He's getting up there in age on the latter half of his career. So there's that. Michael Chiesa has also been half out the door for a long time now. He's been doing the UFC desk work. We see him in between like prelim to main cards or like from early prelims to prelims shows where they talk about the upcoming fights. He's been halfway out the door for a long time. All right. Next up, Tony Ferguson, we know, is a grappling specialist who has 9 career submissions. Okay? 9 career submissions. Michael Chiesa has been submitted 5 times in his career. Michael Chiesa also doesn't pose much of a he's not very dangerous is what I'm trying to say. He has 0 KO wins. So it's not like he's going to be landing some huge bomb on Ferguson to wobble him and get him out of there. He's shown no signs of that throughout his entire career. And yes, Chiesa has 10 submission victories of his own, and Tony has lost 3 times to submission, his most recent being Bobby Green. But Michael Chiesa has lost by Darce choke 3 times in his career, okay? 2 of them being in his last 3 fights to lesser grapplers than Tony Ferguson. His most recent was last year against Kevin Holland. And then before that, Vicente Luque Darce choked him back in 2021. All right? So 3 times in his career he's lost by Darce choke, twice in his last 3 fights. Tony Ferguson has 3 career Darce choke victories. And yes, his most recent one was against Lando Venata back in 2016. But who knows, man? Who knows? Ferguson has had his moments in that 7-fight losing streak as well. Let's go back to the Michael Chandler fight. He was beating Michael Chandler in that first opening round. Okay, he won that first round. Yes, he got front kicked in the face and it looked like he died in the octagon in the opening seconds of that second round. But it's not like he was... Yeah, it looked bad. But he beat Michael Chandler in that first round. Nate Diaz. That was just an awful fight, so I'm not even going to talk about that one. Bobby Green. I'm pretty sure he dropped or stunned Bobby Green in that fight. Let me just double check. He was not credited with a knockdown in that fight. Okay. But I know that he hurt Bobby Green on the feet. And then the Paddy Pimblett fight, yes, he took him to unanimous decision. He didn't really look that good either, but Paddy didn't look like a world beater in that fight. Tony Ferguson held his own. So who's to say he can't do that against Michael Chiesa, find those moments, and eventually lock up a Darce choke? I've spent way too much time on this fight, but I'm picking Tony Ferguson to get this done. Let's move on to the featured fight of the night. We got Marlon Chito Vera going up against Davison Figueiredo. Now, I've liked Figueiredo moving up to bantamweight. I think it was a fantastic move for him. He looks a lot better when he gets into the octagon, not cutting down all of that weight. And he doesn't seem too out of place, even though in this matchup he is probably going to be quite smaller than Chito. I try not to let bias come into play. I know I say that in most of my breakdowns. I'm a huge Chito fan. I just think he's a great guy, and he is an exciting fighter. He can be low volume at times, but he is extremely dangerous. And he's still in his physical prime. The guy's 31, which is insane. He's had 23 UFC fights. So, and he's never been finished. The guy's durable. The guy is powerful. He's dangerous. There's a lot to like about Chito in the fighting. The problem is Figueiredo is also a dangerous fighter. He's dangerous. He's got that wrestling and grappling in his back pocket, and he can also stand on the feet with the best of them. The problem is he's 36 now. And being 35 plus, maybe let's say even 34 plus in these lower weight classes tends to become an issue at one point. And Figueiredo has, even though he's been finished by KO and finished by sub, he is still typically a durable guy, because that KO that KO loss was against Brandon Moreno, and it was a doctor stoppage because of an eye injury. It wasn't like got wobbled, it was a TKO, none of that. So Figueiredo is also very durable. Now the problem is, like I mentioned earlier, Chito can be low volume at times. He's more of a 5-round fighter, so that he can make his reads, he can land those power shots, and he typically can find a finish when he's not getting taken down and controlled on the mat. And I think Davison Figueiredo may find success in doing that. But I'm still going to go with Chito here. Like I said, I don't want to go with bias, but I think he is going to land the more impactful moments. He's going to have the more impactful moments on the feet. He has good enough takedown defense, I believe, to fend off the takedowns from Figueiredo. Let me double check. Cheeto has a 70% takedown defense, and Deiveson Figueiredo has decent accuracy. He's got 42% takedown accuracy. So, and he has been able to take down basically all of his opponents when he needs to. So it's going to be interesting to see. And it's actually quite funny because even though I say Cheeto is low volume, he has more strikes landed per minute than Figueiredo does by a whole 1.3. But he does get hit a lot. He gets hit a lot. And yeah, man, it's just going to be interesting. It's actually crazy. I'm looking at the stats now. In that Pedro Munoz fight, he landed 141 strikes in over 3 rounds, which is not typically Cheeto-esque. And then you go to the Font fight, he lands 159 over 5 rounds, 105 over 3 rounds against Grant. So I guess he has his moments. I guess if he doesn't feel threatened by his opponent's strikes or something like that, he tends to throw more. I don't know what it is. Corey Sandhagen was able to control him and take him down for three times over a 5-round fight, which is obviously not the best look considering Corey is a striker. But yeah, I think the advantage Figueiredo has is the takedowns, the wrestling, the grappling, and I think the advantage Cheeto has is in the striking. But it's going to be tough for him, man. Figueiredo was a dominant flyweight champion, and we'll see how it goes. But I like Cheeto in this matchup. Let's move on to the co-main event. We got Shara Bullet going up against Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Now, this fight, honestly, I'm going to pick Magomedov with very slim confidence, and the reason for that is he looked awful against Antonio Tricoli, who was a layup fight for him 2 months ago. Both these guys fought 2 months ago. But I think the reason why Magomedov is fighting so soon is because he's not allowed to fight in the United States because he's missing an eye. I didn't know that, but I don't think the commissions will allow him to fight in the States. So he has to take advantage of these Middle Eastern fight cards. So he fought in Saudi Arabia. He's fighting 2 months later in Abu Dhabi, and I think he's going to try and be on the pay-per-view in October. That's just my thought process. I would assume, especially if he comes out of this unscathed with barely any damage taken, which is going to be a tough task to accomplish against somebody like Oleksiejczuk. But like I said, I haven't been impressed with Shara. He had a lot of hype coming into the UFC, had a mediocre performance against Silva, where his wrestling defense got exposed. He had an awful performance against Antonio Tricoli, despite the round 3 finish. And he's going up against Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Now, I'd be way more in on the Oleksiejczuk side, but he really only has that Polish power. He really isn't a technically sound fighter. He doesn't really have the wrestling, the grappling. He wants to come in there and he's a do or die fighter. He wants to either finish his opponent or he's going to be the or he's going to be the one who ends up getting finished, is what I'm trying to say. But I think Shara Bullet is going to be technically just the much better technical striker. I think he's going to give Mikhail a lot of different looks to deal with, and as long as Shara can avoid that big power punch that we know Oleksiejczuk has, I think he'll be good. Shara also hasn't shown any signs of durability issues, so that's another reason why I want to pick him here, because I don't know if the power is going to be enough. Also, kind of like an outside of a fighting reasoning behind picking Shara Bullet is I saw Mikhail on social media. I think it was on a comment on a post or something like that, and he was saying that he is done with this sport if he loses against Magomedov, which he says he thinks will happen. I don't know if he's trolling. I don't know what that is, but it seems like he's already 1 foot out the door. It seems like he doesn't have much confidence going in here. So I will take Shara Bullet to get it done in Abu Dhabi. Let's move on to the main event of the evening. We got Corey Sandhagen going up against Umar Nurmagomedov. Now, this was a little tougher for me as well because I really wanted to pick Sandhagen. He has the skills and he has the frame, the kind of fighter to be able to defeat an undefeated fighter like Nurmagomedov. He's been working. He's been showing his evolution in the wrestling in his most recent fights. We know he's a unique and tricky striker to deal with. We've seen him find success in that several times. We saw him, like I said, we saw him the evolution in his wrestling in his last fight against Rob Font. He tore his tricep, I think, in that fight, and he stuck with it. Ended up with utilizing or implementing a wrestling heavy game plan against a striker like Rob Font, and ended up getting that win. The same thing with Cheeto. It says split decision, but that I don't think should have been a split decision. Regardless, same idea. Understood the dangers of going up against somebody like Vera on the feet and implemented that wrestling. Against Song Yadong, he knew Song Yadong has solid takedown defense and has good wrestling defense. So what did he do? He used his length, he used his unique striking style to eventually get a doctor stoppage victory against Song Yadong. Now loses to Peter Yan. That split decision against TJ Dillashaw still pisses me off because I remember watching that fight like it was yesterday. I was at my buddy's wife's family's cottage. That was a tongue twister. And I was watching with my boy, and there was nothing in that fight that screamed TJ Dillashaw win. I do not care what anybody says. That should not have been a split decision for Dillashaw. I think it was like a bounce back fight for Dillashaw or something like that. And whatever. Regardless, I understand the threat, the danger that Sandhagen poses on the feet. And like I said, he's been working on that wrestling. But going up against somebody like Umar, I don't think it's going to be enough. Umar is no slouch on the feet. Okay, he knocked out Hani Barcelos 2 fights ago, January 2023. All right, we know he's a Nurmagomedov, for God's sakes. We know he's going to wrestle, and we know he's going to find success in that department against somebody like Sandhagen. I don't care how much training Sandhagen has done, how many takedown defenses he's drilled. It's not going to be the same as when Umar gets a hold of you and ends up taking you down. Also, Khabib is going to be in Umar's corner, apparently, and we all know that's basically a cheat code on its own. Khabib is basically playing UFC with a controller when he's in the corner of these fighters. I think Umar keeps his 0, and yes, a lot of people are going to talk about him getting knocked down by Bekzat Almakhan in his last fight. And yes, that it wasn't a great look. Okay? But it's kind of nice to see stuff like that happen to undefeated fighters, because when they're so dominant in their fights, it's hard to really gauge how well they will do if something ends up resisting them. So like what I mean is, for example, let's take Tom Aspinall. We all love that guy. He's an absolute menace, and this guy just is a bona fide finisher. He just goes in there and makes quick work of his opponents, gets them out of there in the first round. But the thing is, we haven't really seen him out of that first round, out of that first half of the fight, to really gauge how good Aspinall is. So what this whole rant was about was, it was nice to see Nurmagomedov face some adversity and still keep his wits about him and continue his game plan and get that win. Yes, he was like a minus 1,000 favorite in that fight, and to get knocked down is not a good look. But the fact that he bounced back, the fact that he didn't just call it quits and he came back and ended up getting a unanimous decision victory, good on him for that. It was nice to see him go through some adversity, and that makes me a little more confident in this particular pick. I'm a big Corey Sandhagen fan. I'll be excited if he wins, but I think Umar gets this done. That is going to be the breakdown for the main event. I think Umar wrestles. I think he's going to find a little bit of success on the feet as well. It's not like he's lost up there. It's not like he's Muhammad Makayev on the feet. Poor bastard, Muhammad Makayev. All right, let's wrap things up. Starting off the card, we have Cedric Dumas, Rolando Bedoya, Sam Hughes, Guram Kutateladze, Shamil Gaziev, Kawi Fernandes, Azamat Murzakanov, Joel Alvarez, Lupita Godinez, Tony Ferguson, Tony freaking Ferguson, Marlon Vera, Shara Magomedov, and Umar Nurmagomedov to get things done. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully we can bounce back here by the time you guys are seeing this, you may or may not have seen the weigh-ins already. If there is some glaring things that I see during the weigh-ins, I may make another breakdown video, but for right now, those are all my picks for the entire UFC Abu Dhabi card. It is a noon start time, I believe, Eastern Standard Time. So I'll be excited in the middle of the day, get to wake up, have a coffee, chill out, then I get to watch some fights. Make sure you guys hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Drop some comments down below. Thank you guys so much for joining me for another video. I will see you in the next one.